Professor Wu is funnier than he gives himself credit for. I counted, I think, 3 errors of fact and several errors of logic in his opening remarks. Frank, for 15 minutes, that's accomplishing quite a bit. I don't know how to begin my rebuttal. I feel a little bit like the mosquito at the nudist colony. I'm not sure where to begin. But let me begin with this. Let me begin with this disputed notion about merit, or as Professor Wu says, a rigid meritocracy. Look, I'm quite aware that merit is a very fallible concept. Our president is a Rhodes Scholar. I rest my case. Let me tell you a little story. Let me tell you a little story about a C student from Eureka, Ronald Reagan, who went back to his alma mater in the mid-'80s. And he was asked, isn't it true that you graduated with a C average? And President Reagan replied, yes, and even now I sometimes wonder what I might have accomplished if I had studied harder. So Reagan was confident about himself despite his weak grades. True. Nevertheless, academic institutions must use some measure of merit. No one is saying it should be limited to grades or test scores. You can consider extracurricular talents, but whatever measure you use, what I'm arguing is it should be used in a race-neutral manner. Now, Professor Wu focuses on the problem of discrimination. He says the problem isn't affirmative action. The problem is plain, old-fashioned, regular discrimination. Fine. But the question I have for him is that do we effectively, as a society, fight discrimination by practicing it? This seems to be the paradox of affirmative action. The criticism of affirmative action is not based on a denial of discrimination, but the denial of using discrimination as a technique to outlaw discrimination. I argue that that's contradictory. That creates 2 cases of discrimination. Remember, it's a fundamental principle of justice that when someone has been wronged, you find the guy who has been wronged, benefit him. And you find the guy that did the injustice and make him pay. If I was walking on the street and a car came on the sidewalk, ran over my foot, I have been wronged. But the fact is, would it be a fair remedy for me to set up a booth and collect $25 from every subsequent car that came by? This would be ridiculous. If I want to have a claim, I've got to find the guy who ran over my foot and make a case against him. The point is, can you tell me that any of the Asian, American, and white students who are turned away from Berkeley with better grades and better test scores, even though many of them come from poor families, can you tell me that any of them have been discriminating against anyone? Why should they pay the price? If there are discriminators at Brown, find them and fire them.